What is poppin' gamers? Today we are here to discuss famously the only 11 out of 10 game ever made. It is Tetris the Absolute of the Grandmaster 2.
Ready, go.
Some might say it's the only video game.
Yes. There's also a variant called Plus, from which you can derive the amazing abbreviation TAP, TAP, TAP. If you're sort of in our circle, in our community, and you hear us talk about tap, and you see people just say tap over and over again in all caps, this has become kind of a recurring gag that people ask, "What the fuck is tap?" That's tap. Tetris, the Absolute, the Grandmaster 2 Plus. So yeah, Tetris variant developed by Arika. I think to the average gamer, probably the most obvious touch point would be stuff like the Street Fighter EX series. That's something they're very deeply involved with. But then they made a bunch of other weird games. Some stuff arcadey, some stuff not really arcadey. They also, I think their most played game probably is Tetris 99. They were behind that on the Switch as well. And yeah, Tetris Grandmaster is a whole series. We're now at 4 games as of this year. And they have a very particular style, a lot of particular little rules and systems to them that make them very compelling. Pang, I guess I want to ask you first, sort of, okay, what is your impression of Arika? What do you know of them kind of as a developer? And how do you think that maybe relates to the TGM series?
They're like a weird, like true arcade head,
Mm-hmm.
like whole like sect, right? But I think they're really interesting because for one, they've lasted so long, sort of under the hood, not like putting out a lot of stuff. TGM4 Absolute Eye earlier this year was sort of like oh my God, they're actually putting out one of these again and not just doing hired gun work for Namco or Nintendo or whoever. So they're like the guy who started the company is Akira Nishitani, and so this is like one of the legendary Capcom guys, and he brought over a lot of their like beat 'em up and fighting game team with them. He was a guy who was like, we're talking, you know, a planner on Final Fight, planner on Street Fighter 2, worked on stuff like Children of the Atom and other early fighting games and beat 'em ups from that era from Capcom. And so he brought people over. They started doing, sort of these for one these Street Fighter EX like 3D pseudo 3D fighting games. And then I think their first Tetris game was a Card Captors Sakura game on PlayStation. That has like proto like TGM mechanics.
Oh,
Like
that's a
it's
beast.
all of these games are like this is I think the actual like stuff that doesn't get talked about a lot, but like the language of arcade games and like sort of like the design histories is that like these people like were like true arcade heads who like were very locked in on like specific like okay I don't want to make like any Tetris. They just sit down and make Tetris. Like we all like this very particular Sega Tetris from the late 80s, right? And so TGM is sort of their interpretation of a lot of those mechanics and pulling those forward and iterating on them with each release, refining them, oftentimes modernizing them. And Yeah, I really respect them. I'm also like an Endless Ocean fan, right? I was playing that earlier this year. I was really I was really touched by it. And it is cool that they just have that range, and a lot of the people like they're not a very siloed studio. Like a lot of the people who worked on TGM or worked on Street Fighter EX, like they did Everblue, they did Endless Ocean. Like they just have like I think they don't pigeonhole themselves. They're very much like we'll do whatever. We do lots of great arcade games, but we also are willing to like dip our toes into something more, like experiential, like immersive, world driven, something like all these diving sims. So yeah, I have a lot of the more I've like been playing their games, and since I really got into TGM back after the GDQ run from ages ago, I respect them a lot as like one of those like secretly like awesome Japanese developers that's still going on today.
Hell yeah. I remember I think did they do a Kickstarter for Fighting EX Layer? Was that how that happened? Um, it was
That
basically
sounds right. Yeah.
yeah, it was basically
I
Arika getting back the rights to the characters that they made unique to Street Fighter EX for Capcom and making an original fighting game off of that. Again, that was kind of a big move that put them on the map again a little bit, at least in my mind. I think they assisted on Tekken 8 netcode as well, which is really interesting.
I don't remember there being a Kickstarter for Fighting X Layer, but the kind of announcement and unveiling of that game was funny. From my understanding, I don't know anything with the rights of the characters and how that was split up, but I'm pretty sure it started as like an April Fool's joke almost. And everyone's like,
Yeah.
what is this new like EX thing? And then I don't know if it was already in development at that point or people liked it based on the April Fool's joke and it turned into a real game. But definitely ever since that game's inception, it's just been a very like a funny piece of, I guess, not just like Arika's history, but just like modern kind of Japanese developer history. It's just like a very weird like slice of it.
Yeah, that definitely rings a bell. I I mentioned Tetris 99 as probably most likely their most popular game. And that is a really cool one that I enjoy and that I played a lot as well. And again, it makes me it's not really in the scope of the podcast, but it makes me think, okay, what's sort of their finances? How do they move from project to project? I find that very fascinating. That they've remained so pure, and yet for some companies like Nintendo or even Capcom, um, to be like very desirable to work with.
I get the sense that they are like sort of known for being
Yeah.
like a puzzle game,
Mm-hmm.
especially like specialists, because they've got like they did a Puzzle Bobble on DS. They did Dr. Mario sequels for Nintendo all the way back into like the late 2000s. Um I
Also, they
think they
probably just like know all those guys.
yeah,
Or, like,
yeah.
work on those
Yeah.
companies.
Yeah, I think I think they have like a little bit of like a like they're known for doing like puzzle games that aren't necessarily like TGM. And of course they did like even within TGM, like I'd say like TGM Ace, which we might talk about later, is sort of
Yeah.
like a weird like okay, they're doing more of like a less their vision, more like here's what another company wants us to do, that kind of thing. I think I was reading is like they basically just squirreled away funds to do Fighting EX Layer between all these fucking like Dr. Luigi and all these 3D classics.
I was
NES
about to say
games.
Dr. Luigi. I just remembered that that game
Yep.
existed, and I was like, wait, is that also Rika? And then yes, it is. That's so awesome.
So fire.
I'll
Yeah,
download
what
that
if
on my Wii U right now tonight. This time.
One of two people in the world with a Wii U plugged in, and they're both in this call.
So fucking true. So again, going off Tetris 99, I'm a little tempted to talk about Tetris more generally. I think it's been often described as the perfect video game. We're not gonna go all over that, right? But I think it's if you're sort of a casual game connoisseur, I think you might appreciate Tetris like on that level a little bit, but then take the differences between all the different versions for granted. I remember when we did our Good Games Canon sort of round for the 2000s, which is our series where we rank the best games of a given decade. I remember a couple people saying, okay, like it's fucking Tetris. Like, does that even qualify as a new game? And yes, it does, my friend. It's very different. There's this thing known as guideline Tetris, which is, as I understand it,
Alexei Pajitnov and Hank Rogers.
and just the Tetris company laying down specific sets of like templates and like again guidelines to follow for how to design a Tetris game. And that obviously means that there's a lot of commonality between certain like sets of Tetris games. But But then, something like TGM 4 was kind of interesting because supposedly it would buck a lot of those trends. Maybe Hot Pocket, do you have insight into the overall Tetris scene, the difference between like Guideline Tetris and maybe the TGM series, why TGM specifically is so special?
Not really, because I mean the thing is I don't play Guideline. I don't know.
Yeah.
I literally got into Tetris seriously 6 months ago when I'm like, oh, I'm gonna play TGM too. I mean, I can tell you I like played. Well, I can tell you they're different. There's a lot, and we'll probably get into this later. There's a lot of random differences between all the different games, even within TGM. The rotation system is totally different in between TGM and Guideline. Within the TGM, the way there's something called wall kicks that they change. There's holds and the amount of piece preview. The speed curves are different. Yeah, there are a lot of differences. I need someone who's played Guideline like Pang till they actually explain it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure exactly who to ask.
I think for one, a lot of the differences are stuff we'll get into later regarding like and these are things that, as far as I'm aware, like originated in Sega Tetris, like the Sonic drop. Basically, like you can drop the piece to the floor, but it doesn't lock it, and then there's a separate input for locking. That doesn't exist in Guideline. I think Guideline wall kicks are like still, even with TGM4, like vastly expanding the repertoire. Like they're fucking ridiculous, and then you can also like sort of infinite rotate the pieces. Like there's no like TGM and a lot of the older ones will sort of void you out after a point if you try like manipulating the pieces too long. So that doesn't really exist in Guideline. The whole like, and basically like every Tetris game since maybe, I think I had it up. Is it the new Tetris? The new Tetris on N64 is like the OG like testing grounds, and that's like a weird game because it's like it's got this 4x4 square system where you can like, if you make a perfect 4x4 block out of 4 tetraminos, like there's like a score multiplier.
Oh.
And so they have this weird randomizer built. It's basically, I think it's 7 bag. Like there's 7 copies of each piece in the bag, which is very like unorthodox. Those sort of grew into Tetris Worlds, which was actually, that was my first Tetris growing up, which most people don't really like nowadays. That's sort of like the original Guideline game. I'm pretty sure it's 7 bag, or it's well, I said 7 bag earlier. What I meant was like 7 times 7 or whatever. I guess that's what, 49 bag. So new Tetris is like, actually it might be even more than that, I don't know. But Tetris Worlds is like you have 7 of each piece, and then it's gonna throw them all in a quote unquote bag. It's gonna select them all in order, or not in order, but it'll just like select them, and then it'll throw them all back in the bag. So you're always guaranteed to get like, if you want a particular piece, you're guaranteed to get it within the next like 7 to 14 pools, right? And so those things sort of became like emblematic of like modern Tetris, and have any like modern, like if you play Puyo Puyo Tetris, if you play Tetris Effect, those games are going to like abide by those systems, and they're all very like multiplayer focused. They're all heavy on like these weird like key spin architectures where you're trying to like like spider climb these the T pieces down these like craggy lattices, like within, or I guess uh like your well isn't like a straight well like you would have it in like in a normal Tetris game, where you have like, you take the eyepiece, you just drop it down in, it's like this weird look. So it's sort of like grown up in its own way, and there's like there's a big modern scene around it. I don't have like anything like in particular on Guideline, but I also don't really play multiplayer Tetris, right? I played some on Puyo Puyo, but I don't think any of us are really that invested in it. And if you're into single player Tetris, then you're either playing like, one of the old Tetrises, usually like Tetris NES, which is like a very, very restrictive rule set, or you're playing TGM. I think since like sort of the West has in the last 10 years sort of discovered TGM, it's been sort of like this is the highest skill ceiling, like most interesting single player Tetris experience you can find around. Even though they still like if you play TGM4, it's got all of the guideline rules in it, but they just are like, hey, we have a separate mode that's like the real game, right? And then you just go play that. So that's sort of like I guess broad differences there. I don't want to get like super in it because there's a lot of like nitty gritty mechanics that I'd rather discuss like like later. But
Yeah.
it's it gets very very in depth, and even like individual guideline games are like very like we'll have like minor little differences here and there as they grew and evolved the rule set.
That split between TGM and Guideline is really interesting because the ethos of both is clearly so different. Because at this point, a lot of the people playing Guideline, you see it a lot in like Puyo Puyo Tetris or Tetris 99, where it's very clearly like more of a one-on-one style competition. So some of the rules of the game are kind of balanced in that regard. So you mentioned like T-spins versus just regular Tetrises. The game, since it values T-spins more, you end up playing completely differently. You have a completely different mindset for this, again, one-on-one focus compared to TGM, which since its inception has always been definitely like competitive, but kind of in an intrinsic way, I suppose, when you're like directly comparing like how far you can get. And it's built this unique level structure, which we'll get into obviously. And like never mind even just the mechanical differences with, the rotation system or holds or whatever from the start, and especially where they end up. The split is always interesting. And you mentioned Guideline kind of coming with TDM4. I forget exactly when it happened or what the kind of logistics of it are, but from my understanding, pretty much every Tetris release like has to follow like very specific rules of the Guideline. And ever since TGM3, their way around that is including Guideline and then just including whatever extra shit they want. So in 3, they have it instead of TGM and Guideline, they label it as World and Classic. I forget which is which. I think Classic is Guideline and World is TGM. And then in TGM4, they clean it up a little bit. You can very clearly tell, like, hey, this is the TGM mode where you have, levels 1 to 999 and everything else. And then Guideline just, counting how many lines you get with all those individual rules that change.
Yeah, that's exactly. And it's also worth mentioning that TGM, like, they have versus modes. At least TGM2 does. I don't think the first one does, but I think that every one after that has had some sort of versus mode, and people play them. Like you can find videos of online like tournaments and that kind of thing. But it's always like I think it's less known for that than it is for like the blisteringly fast like single player play that it has.
Yeah. I guess now would be a good time to give a slight overview over the whole series. We're not just gonna focus on 2 for the most part. But yeah, obviously you start with the first game. I don't remember the exact sort of arcade hardware that it came out on. I know it was somewhat derivative of like PlayStation somehow. There's a way to play it on an original PlayStation or like on a PSP even on that emulator, which is really cool. And the thing that stuck out to me that the series kind of establishes is that it has these line thresholds. So every 100 lines, the speed gets, well, the play field somehow changes a little bit, right? So for most of those thresholds, the game gets faster, but then sometimes the game gets slower, right? The gravity just completely stops at a couple thresholds, and I don't remember if the first TGM had the ghost piece already to indicate where you're gonna drop. Was that a thing, or?
I think so. Like most of TGM 1 and 2 are like very similar.
Yeah.
Even if you look at the gravity curves, like if I recall, are like more or less the same. Like they both like around 300 is where you hit like 1G and you escalate up to like 5G at like 450 and then drop down a bit and then you're at 20G from like 500 on.
Yeah.
Like it's very they're pretty similar. And TGM1 sort of feels like just a I don't even call it like basically like it's almost like a prototype of 2. Like it doesn't have quite the same.
That was like the word I had in mind as well.
Self-identity. Yeah.
Yeah. The point I was going at is that, so one little like trick that they do, for example, is you start with the ghost piece that again will indicate where you're going to drop your piece. It's a nice visual aid, but then at some point at a certain threshold, they just remove it. And there's a couple little sort of gimmicks and tricks like that that as like a casual player on a surface level, it keeps the pacing kind of very evolving, very exciting. It doesn't just get harder in a linear way. And we've actually talked about this a lot with TGM2 especially, where at certain thresholds the music just stops, cuts out. You still have the sound effects, and I don't know if the sound effects themselves change at all, but like it feels like they're much more emphasized in kind of the stillness, of lacking the soundtrack suddenly.
Quiet sadness of Tetris the Grandmaster.
So fucking true. And then, just as another example, right? When you play TGM2 in its normal difficulty, at the final threshold, again the soundtrack cuts out. You get like really tense. Your heart starts beating, and then when you finally make it to the credits, then the like congratulatory victory music starts playing, and the gravity goes insane. What I'm trying to illustrate is that these games have such a they're so conscious about their pacing and so conscious about their presentation and like drawing you into that way. And again, we kept saying they're the de facto single player Tetris, and I think it's for that specific reason. It's I want to say the only other game that's kind of captured this or tried to capture this is Tetris Effect, right? Where okay, it has these stages, and then the stages don't really progress linearly. You have very intentional changes in the gravity and the music. And now, I think your reaction to either game will be very different, sort of depending on what your proclivities are in regards to like the vibe of each game. I think we've discussed before Tetris Effect, kind of cheesy game. Is TGM the better vibes Tetris? I guess that's the question I want to ask to the panel.
Yes. Like no questions asked. Like in my opinion, especially like TGM2 tap is fucking like the amount of effort they put into like the sort of overall aesthetic of like machines churning just pointlessly, like there's constant energy transfer and fluctuation and in movement is fucking incredible.
Especially over time, I've grown to really appreciate TGM2's aesthetic quite a lot. I do think the fun split in my head between kind of 2 and Effect are the way the Tetris Effect kind of tries to abstract the Tetris experience as much as possible while maintaining the kind of mechanic side of it. Because I think it's very clear that 2 is very kind of like quote unquote emotional just because of its difficulty as well. Like there's a lot kind of compounding on this like primary game experience and all the feelings you get while doing that. Like it's very frenetic, it's chaotic, everything's moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But in effect, they kind of peel every single thing back where they may as well just have like, code on screen and then the beautiful backgrounds and music going on. It's like the split of like when you're playing Tetris, do you want to either cry or do you want to have a panic attack? Those are like the emotional splits essentially.
Yeah.
But I think they both do those exceptionally well, better than they're pretty much the only 2 SKUs of Tetris that really shoot for that kind. Unless you're really digging a hole like the CDI version of Tetris, I think or is it 3DO? I forget. But unless you're going really deep down the rabbit hole, there's really not a lot of Tetrises that are trying to evoke a sort of like sensation while playing beyond just the general Tetris game feel.
To me, this is like the best implementation of this kind of thing that I've ever experienced. Yeah, like Peng was saying. The backgrounds are all these kind of pointless, or machines that are just sort of almost ominously just constantly in motion without any seeming particular goal. Which is it's actually reflective of like the experience and act of playing the game. Fundamentally, getting good at this game is basically as a human becoming more machine-like for no particular purpose. and it actually really does integrate with that in like a deep way. And that sounds kind of corny, but also it sells it because the game is so like compelling. I mean, I would say even to a point, it is so compelling that it makes you, if how do I say it's compelling enough that it can make you think about the entire idea of getting good at one of these games and how worthwhile or not worthwhile that might be for you personally.
See that what you just said about you become more machine, that would go so hard on backlogged. Like that's how we get them. Um, yeah, y'all were talking about earlier in the pre-show how I think they had the same amount of background artists for the game that they did for like just engineers and like game designers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like maybe 7 or 8 or 9, some it's like several background artists, and then there's basically that many other people who are just like planners, programmers,
Yeah.
like producers, etc. Because these are pretty like there's not a lot in this game. It's pretty taut. But yeah, they really went in a way that they really didn't with the other TGMs. I sort of like three's space aesthetic. It's sort of like a vastness, and there's like a different softness to it. Which it gives me like late game Monkey Ball 2 vibes.
Yes.
You're like sort of like soaring and like discovering all these new things. And the new one just looks like mobile slop, which
Oh no.
is cheap. Yeah.
We'll get to it.
Would you agree with
That
that?
bad, but it's that you can tell. I mean, they are not experienced with like HD development in that way.
It feels like an Xbox Live Arcade game.
Yeah, that was what we were all
Yeah.
saying when it was out.
Which I'm glad they made it. I'm glad they dropped it. But
Oh my god. The
Yeah.
screenshots, man.
Yeah, that it was the CDI version.
That's crazy.
oh, that's sick. We gotta put those in.
Yeah.
I'm gonna play this version.
Peng, you were saying earlier that there's one background where it's like these ominous fans just going and going, and it's like low-key giving Silent Hill vibes.
It's literally like that fucking part of Silent Hill 3, the puzzle, where you have to turn off the fan. So I think it's like towards the end of the mall or something. It's that same sort of like dusky orange,
Yeah.
like glow behind like, because I think that is sort of like that's one of the classic like horror things is repetition, right? And like sort of zooming in on repetition, right? And so I think like where Hot Pocket and I like eventually like tapped out and master was like in the late 700s, right? And like you get to that point and it's like the 600 one is relatively like gentle, right? It's just like sort of cool, and it does a pretty good job like throughout the game alternating like the more aggressive backgrounds with like lighter ones that are like a little smoother, right? But that once you hit 7, it feels like, oh my god,
That's when the music changes again too.
yeah. The music, it's just like they're all sort of like classic hardcore rave, and then later in the game it sort of starts verging on like gabber, like this kind of like
yeah, because the cool part, right? TGM1 just I think has the one song, right? And then the TGM2 song for the first 500 levels, is a it's that song basically. It's like and then it's like a little, and then when you get from 500 to 699, that's the next song, and it's kind of another remix again. That's like a little a little faster, a little more intense. But then, of course, when you hit 700, then it changes again to the more, like the like gabber with the harmonica or whatever.
yeah,
Because that's when it actually starts becoming different from TGM1, because the actual timings get shorter, which is not a feature in TGM1. The timings of like the time you have to make each decision, which is independent from the gravity.
So
We can talk more about that. later.
Yeah, before we move on to TGM2 like deep dive, maybe Luke, do you want to tell us about Terror Instinct, not Killer Instinct, Terror Instinct a little bit? I think you're the only one that's like really played it in our group.
Yes. So I guess for like we were kind of gesturing towards this for a while, but every kind of Tetris Grandmaster game kind of has like a different, I don't want to say theme, but kind of aesthetic towards it. So TGM1 and all of its backgrounds, you see it's a lot of like nature, and I think maybe biology specifically is what they,
Yeah.
consider it. You get a lot of, trees and I love how that's the only example I can think of, but it ends up being like brains, and then the last one is like a baby. Um, TGM2 is obviously all like machinery and like this constant like moving forward of whatever you want to call it. 3 is all space themed, which you would at a glance maybe suspect as more chilled out, which as far as the backgrounds go, it's way less complex. Instead of going for kind of pre-rendered 3D backgrounds with a lot of intense movement to it, it's all kind of just PNGs, which sounds really disappointing. And compared to 2, in some ways it is, but it kind of lets the backgrounds kind of be a part of the whole thing in a way that 2 doesn't. So like 2 is very in your face, which I really love and appreciate, but 3 it all kinds of like melts together in a really cool way. But on top of like the weird space backgrounds, you have the soundtrack, which changes way more often than 2, because 2 it has this very clear progression from like here's pre 500 and then here's the insanity of everything that comes after. 3 has way more like starting lower gradual progression, but then kind of peaks out way crazier. I don't have like the kind of the proper comparison points, but the influences they pull from of like musical genres feels out of control. Like all you need to do is just open the
3 has
soundtrack
that
on.
like that kind of funny one that's like maybe in like the 200 or 300 that I can't remember. You know what song I'm talking about?
Gosh,
It's
which
kind of like
one?
da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah, that's literally right in that range.
Like it's kind of goofy and doesn't really sound like
Yeah,
any of the other songs in
and
the game, which is super funny.
and the music cuts out. It's like it's like a screw attack or something. And then yeah, it's just pulling from. It starts out lower and kind of ends way higher. Um, and the whole experience is just it's very unique for TGM, which I appreciate, and I love like even though they kind of push the series in different ways. So we mentioned holds and piece previews because at that point that was added to guideline Tetris, and that kind of spilled over into TGM. You do get that, so mechanically they do touch up a lot of things. Rotations probably are a little bit cleaner. The game has more input lag, which is a really funny thing. It has variable, like I think it's 4 to 6 or 5 to 6 frames of input delay. It's kind of a bummer, but it's
Great
whatever. It is a great game. But the actual play field itself, it has this like pseudo 3D effect going on where all of the pieces have this like metallic sheen to them, and all of the pieces you can kind of see like depth to them, which it's just like an aesthetic thing, but it's a very bizarre. But anyway, like aside from the aesthetics, like the most well-known thing that TGM3 is very clearly known for is kind of an extension of its grading system. Something we haven't really talked about is how the better you play, you're essentially graded through different criteria throughout the series, and it completely changes in each one, and I don't have a good gauge of that necessarily. But generally there's time and score requirements for progressing up. Usually it's like 9 to 1, and then they get to like letters and whatnot. 3, not instead of just having a grade within each run of the game, there's actually a local account system on each arcade board to where you can like load up a profile and set a password or whatever. And as you consistently play, like say me, I might get a 2s consistently because I'm not very good at it. After a certain amount of runs, I think it's maybe your last 5 out of 7, if you have an average of a certain score, that's when they give you a promotional exam, and it's like, hey, if you can finish this, you get this permanent mark on your profile of what your actual grade is. So in TGM2, say, there's a lot of grandmasters out there because the criteria of getting that is just beating the game with grandmaster. The second layer of that in 3 is you have to do all of the insanely stupid shit that the game asks you to, on top of doing it consistently 5 out of 7 times in a row, and then doing it again. And some of the fun stuff in 3 includes really crazy time requirements to get through all the sections. a certain amount of Tetrises, I think. And then most infamously is once you hit level 999, you have to play the entirety of the credits with invisible pieces. And
That's
you
fire.
also, not even just that, you still have a Tetris requirement within the credits to score a GM. So you have to do pretty much just about like 6 GM runs in a row. And the count is like in the 40s of how many people have done that. There's an anecdote where people are like, oh, more people have climbed Mount Everest than have gotten GM in TGM3, which is true. Maybe we can put it up, but there's like a really like famous video, which I honestly think is probably a lot of the West's like exposure to TGM3. It's just like called like Tetris God or something from like 17 years ago. There was I don't know if it was an Akira or Arika employee or just like a really good Tetris player, but Arika had put up this like footage of a guy in their office getting a GM run, and I mean by now there's been almost like 1 million views on it, and I know that's how I saw TGM3 because I'd only played NES Tetris on cartridge at that point, so seeing whatever that was, it like stuck with me. And then years later, finally getting to emulate the game, like even though at this point it's not the Tetris I'm playing all the time, it's predictably tap, just because it's very pure, not having holds and not having previews and whatnot, and also just playing really well. But there is like it's the game's got aura. I mean, it's called Terror Instinct. Like, come on, you can't beat it, you know. But
So
it's a cool game. It's very strange, and you know, it's in some ways been outclassed by other games because it's the intersection of right when guidelines started to add these new rules and stuff. So in some ways, it's not as
Mhm.
refined, but it definitely holds a cool piece of Tetris history, I think.
There's definitely like with how these games have progressed, like they always I think they do like a really good like just in general design technique that they're even when like each of these games is like adding more wall kicks or they add holds and piece previews and all that stuff, like they compensate by making like the skill ceiling like more and more ridiculous like across all the games. Like because I know like I don't know how many people have Grandmaster in 4 yet. Like I know I've seen at least one, but it's like there's like ridiculous shit where they freeze the whole bottom of the play area like past a certain point, and it goes like cyclically, so like you can't clear stuff below that, like you just basically can only play in the top half of the board like you're forced to, and then when you get it back it's like you better have made a clean stack under there because then you need to like clear it all as quickly as possible before the next freeze comes, right?
Mhm.
And just like they do like way more levels that you have to clear than like it feel like they basically have the same like TGM2 style master mode, and it's basically just the normal mode now.
Yeah, just
And
because the
like none
difficulty
of
gets scaled up over time.
exactly, and like none of us ever been in the TGM2 one. I think the now with holds obviously like, and this is part of why I've never like invested a lot of time in those is because I'm like I know as soon as I let my brain like get some of like start moving in that direction, like start thinking with holds when I'm playing, like it is going to sort of fuck up my TGM play. Um, but it is cool that like no matter what new stuff they add, it's like they're like, okay, we're gonna add this new stuff. It's gonna be easier on you, and you better fucking use it if you want to actually be good at this game. You better get really, really,
Mm.
really good at using it.
Yeah,
That is something that they've, I think, like benefited from the more they've developed this series out.
yeah. TGM. I did have like a couple interjections about Ford. Just because I haven't, obviously I'm not getting GMs in 4 or anything. Traditionally in the series it just caps out at 100 or 1,000, excuse me, whether you're doing like master mode or death mode where the game starts out at instant gravity. So the TGM version of master, it's essentially death from the older TGMs where it starts out at instant gravity. But the couple thresholds, so Pang, you already mentioned, at level 500, pieces will be frozen on the bottom half of the screen. So 5 to 600, bottom half of the board, completely unusable. And then 6 to 700, you get leeway. 7, 800, it's frozen. Later on, the way that the board freezes gets a little bit different. Like, from what I understand, the board will gradually like freeze from the bottom to the top. And more of the board will become unusable. The two funniest gimmicks, though, at some point, the starting rotation of the pieces becomes randomized. So normally, you know, you might
Oh
get
yeah, I
a T,
saw that.
yeah, you might get a
That's
T piece that
insane.
normally is like point up and then it's point down and whatever. So that'll fuck you up. On top of that, and this is well into like the 2600s of level, so it's way, it takes a lot longer. There's a gimmick that happens where I think if you scored, I don't know how they score it, but if you played well enough, the game essentially rolls back maybe 200 levels, and you have to get back to that score in under a minute to like qualify for GM on that run. It's very strange, but it's super cool. I'm glad they got really creative and like weird with it. And people already found like kind of gimmicks to do the kind of final portion of it pretty easily, but it's just like I'm even up to now, I'm glad they're just finding new and creative ways to just fuck with the player like really, really heavily.
And there's probably a limit to that. I mean, you can really these type of mechanics. You can only add player abilities and capabilities so much before your fundamentals start cracking. But I mean, I think it's cool that they try to push it so far, because I think it's like, I mean, the other games all exist still, so play those.
See, that's the age-old action game dilemma, which just proves that TGM is also.
Yeah. Okay. Can we start? Can we like? Oh yeah.
It's a melee action game.
We've been quoting the Tetris wiki for 30 minutes. We need to start waxing poetic with the game mechanics.
So true.
Yes,
I want to do real quick. Tetris Grandmaster Ace. Yes, they threw in one more game in there.
Yeah.
I actually have played this
Play
one.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, you played
This
it?
is a blind spot for me, so I'm curious to hear about this.
See, it's a bummer because like I forgot this one existed, and then I didn't actually like play it just before the podcast. Right? My last play session was like ages ago, so I couldn't really tell you anything substantive about it. This is a Japan-only launch title for the 360. Obviously, the 360 famously the greatest D-pad known to man, so obviously you need a Tetris game to take advantage of that. That's a joke. The one thing I couldn't really tell you anything about, like, okay, I think it has a hole that has a pretty significant piece preview. I could not really tell you about how the thresholds kind of work, how the gravity works, what the modes are. Unfortunately, like all the text.
Jank,
Yeah.
I think they had to do. Does anyone? Maybe I should look it up real quick. I think they had to do some jank where TGM rotation is like a free DLC or something to get around guidelines.
I was going to talk about that. Yeah. So
I've just never heard anyone like actually take this game seriously compared to the other ones, just because it seems like it's sort of too much baggage for what it is.
The menus are sort of unusable if you don't read Japanese, so that made it like hard for me to like actually like understand what the fuck I was doing. But basically, yes, when the game launched, the original like classic TGM rotation system, as well as the Sonic drop, is not available by default. And so by default you can't Sonic drop. It's just a regular hard drop. And there's like all this conflicting information online about how to unlock it. I think you can unlock it just through the game, but nobody really knows how. I couldn't really figure it out. You can just install a patch that came out like I think a week or so after the game launched. Unless, you're like me and you're on a modded 360 and the patch is obviously not available that way. I guess if you get the disc now, the patch is probably still up on the server. I think you can probably still get it officially. But I had to do some real like fucking internet scouring to get the patch. And then guess what? Yes, I was able to enable the classic TGM rotation with the Sonic drop. Woohoo! And then I never played the game again. So,
Great game.
Yeah, let's start with TGM 2.
It's almost like fucking where do we start? Because it's such a simple game, and I think like people are so familiar with what Tetris is like an inherent concept, right?
Yeah.
Like what the pieces look like and everything.
I mean, maybe that makes it easy because then we just talk. I mean, so I guess if you like the central progression is this level system, right? Basically, you just I mean, it's loosely tied to lines cleared. I mean, there's a number, and the number goes up every time you get a piece, and it goes up every time you clear some lines. And your goal is to get the number to 999 without dying, right?
Yep.
The thing I guess that would probably differentiate. I have played, for the record, I've played enough Godland Tetris to understand that it felt weird to me because I didn't play enough. Like there's definitely a lot of. I played some Puyo Puyo. So like the thing with TGM is that TGM is very driven by the gravity. That's really kind of the
Yes.
central feature, right? A lot of other like the Tetris games, the gravity is a function where it basically just gives you less time to think. And then later, in something like Nest Tetris, right? There gets to be some strategic considerations as well, right? Where it's like, okay, once the gravity gets so high, you start getting locked out of certain moves unless you can like mash the button really fast with rolling and stuff like that. And even like it evolves from a just like a you have to think faster to okay my actual like the moves I can do are now being like mutated.
Yeah.
And so TGM is really an expansion of that type of idea. So as you go up in the levels, right, the gravity overall gets more strong. Up until 500 is the halfway point, and that's when it'll go to something called 20G. It's called 20G because in a single frame, the piece drops all 20 of the rows down. So, aka, it just drops instantly, right? And so, if you've played Godline, you'll be like, how do you play the game, right? Because when you like touch the ground in Guideline, you just get locked in, as I recall. This is the other thing with TGM. It has something called lock delay, where basically there's a certain amount of time, it's about half a second for most of the game, where you can like slide the piece along the surface of the stack, right? And so this feature combined with like it actually makes 20G, you can still like you can sort of play it. And as you get more and more into it, you realize that this has a lot of very interesting considerations for how you want to build your stack in terms of being able to slide the pieces into place, but also still, keep all your piece availability that you still would want normally and such things.
Yeah.
I remember watching you play Hot Pocket and noticing, for example, that you would try to stack sort of toward the middle, toward the center of the board, because that way you can land with the piece that's coming from the top in the center, like it's sort of a pyramid shape, you have to imagine, and then you can slide it either left or right. If you follow the classic Tetris instinct of like starting from the left side of the board and then building kind of down diagonally, and then leaving the right, leaving a well on the right to slide on an eyepiece, that will fuck you up at higher speeds. I think that is sort of the perfect encapsulation of how you have to think with the gravity. It's much different. Again, to articulate it in the more sort of surface level, like sensual way, is that it very physically feels like I'm interacting with the pieces. I have a very physical sense of how the pieces are like contacting the other collision objects, the other pieces, the walls in the board. That is something that gets more and more significant the faster the game gets and the harder it gets. And
the way the rotations are defined, it kind of is this approximation of the piece quote rolling across the surface.
Yes.
There's some like weird nuances and like not, but it's like I would say in the moment it basically it feels approximately like that. So you can sort of do some stuff that you might think, in your mind dimly is something like rolling it across the surface.
That's one part I'm slightly confused about. When you roll over the surface and when you rotate the piece, while that's happening, right? Does the direction of the rotation matter?
Yeah, sometimes. It depends.
Because yeah,
That's when some stuff. I would say almost everything about this game is deeply. It is shockingly and deeply intuitive for how complex and deep
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
enduring fundamentals. I would say the rotations are one of the one things that are like, okay, you kind of just have to like play it a lot and or look it up to really
Yeah.
understand deeply.
Yeah.
because,
And even with those, because you will start to get like certain intuitions on like what wall kicks are possible, right? And then sort of like because the wall kicks are basically like either you're pushing off the wall, but more commonly you're snapping through another piece, right? And so you can sort of start to see like if I have like an overhang, if I have like an uneven stack, if it's shaped roughly in the shape of this particular piece, I can put the piece in a certain orientation that is like jutting out of the hole, and then click the correct rotation, it'll snap in. And for a lot of them, especially like simple like Z ones or snapping the J's and L's under like certain things, like you can just sort of like by looking at it, you eventually realize like, oh, this works this way. What now, of course, the more you play, then you start realizing there's all these weird other ones. And there's oftentimes like very particular setups you can do to like for things that are not like very obvious holes that it was like, oh, here's the hole this piece fits in, how do I like maneuver it in. You can start to sort of like juggle them across across this. I keep wanting to say like almost I can't say skimming because skimming is like something else, but like
You kind of vault
there's-
it over the little
Yeah.
jagged bits on your
Yeah.
surface.
Yeah, like getting
Um,
in.
yeah.
I was gonna say getting into like TGM, like something I mean, I still don't have like a great grasp of it, but just like considering the actual like almost physical hinge point of where the piece rotates can completely like just change the dynamic of how and what direction you have to flip stuff over. And I'm not great at it yet, but it's definitely like probably the next layer of like what I really need to get into is. And actually seen, I don't know how to enable it, but it looks like TGM4 it does let you just enable where the actual like hinge is on the piece, which is probably like really good practice to like visualize that.
Hmm.
Because otherwise it sometimes it feels almost random, especially in 2 where the game is like pretty picky when it comes to like getting stuff
There
in
isn't
holes.
Yeah, because there isn't like a hinge like that. That's not really how it works. There's
Hmm.
like there's basically just defined positions that
Well,
it
yeah.
switches into. There's a hinge in the sense that they looked that when they made the rotation system, they kind of looked and it's like approximately if it was rotating on in this way, how would it kind of look maybe? But
Yeah.
but then in a lot of cases that is not necessarily like
Okay.
the immediately intuitive result.
Yeah.
The hinge is at least like you sort of want to think of it in terms of like you have to have some understanding of how it rotates and like the asymmetry of it. That's the
Yes.
real like
Yeah, exactly.
and the asymmetry I think is the other thing that like well actually before I bring that up, there was something else I wanted to say just about the pieces in general, right? Because asymmetry is like I think like a whole like system spanning concept, but something I do think that TGM to in this vein like just gets really right once you hit 20G is that there's sort of concepts for each of the pieces that you learn in more traditional forms of Tetris that get sort of ruptured, right, by 20G. Like the eyepiece is the most classic example
Yep.
because the eyepiece is
Mhm.
traditionally your cash out piece, right? You're sort of, especially in whole Tetris, you're trying to get to a point where like okay, I build up my stack enough. Generally, you have a well on the right side that you're going to drop into, and then okay, I have enough, lines built up. I'm just gonna slide eyepiece down there, right? And the once you're in 20G, like something that is sort of free, right? And even like the eyepieces can sort of fix like other issues, like wells that are holes that are deeper than 2 pieces, or even like a 2-piece hole, like in a pinch. Like you can, once you get into 20G like you're either in a position where you have the flat piece, like you have it in the flat orientation, where it's way longer than any of the other pieces, and it gets easily caught between
Yes.
things, or you have it in the vertical rotation, where it's not like it'll just sort of get stuck in any hole, and so much of the game, from like that point forward is just figuring out how to like even to the point of introducing like little holes in your stack, like making sure the top is like a flat roll down for the eyepiece to go on like either side, right? Then there's times you also want to keep it flat either because your stack is flat enough or because you want to like you just want to basically want to like bridge it over to the wall and then try to clear it as quick as possible to open the hole back up again. But in the way it like influences every other piece, like suddenly every single like jut and like part that sticks out in any of the piece that's like in every single rotation suddenly becomes like a major issue because they'll get caught rolling along the terrain, or they won't like snap where you want them to snap, right? And it's very like, especially like the T piece, I feel like is like the hidden like evil one because T pieces are sort of your universal like
Yes.
I'm gonna fix this situation piece in like the normal mode. And once you get because they like their biggest like benefit, the fact that it has like a single block jutting out of each side, and can fix so many like craggy or rocky like stack orientations is suddenly like it will get caught in every single one of those. And
Yeah.
there's like trying to keep it do they drop with like sort of the top like the long part of
Well,
the
the
teeth
reason it's such a
coming out?
problem is because of
Yeah.
initial rotation, right?
Yeah.
The other reason you can play in 20G and have the game work and be fun is that TGM has something called initial rotation, where when a piece gets placed down, right, between that time and the next piece actually like entering the playfield, there's a kind of a little gap, right?
Yeah.
And in that span of time, you can hold the either rotation left or rotation right, and then whichever one you're holding, the piece will start rotated that direction
Mm-hmm.
already. So like, the normally the S's and Z's, right? They kind of spawn horizontally, and then if you're holding the rotation, then they'll come into the field vertically.
Yeah.
The thing is, the T's initial position, right? It is actually shaped like a T, right? So the little bit is down. So both of the initial rotations for that piece still have that little bit at the bottom. So
Yep.
if you have a hole in the fifth column, which is where every piece initially spawns for the most part, then it just gets stuck, and you basically, I mean, you just like, you kind of just gotta take the loss.
Yeah, like low
Yeah.
key
It is painful.
in that
Yeah.
type of situation, I found it almost more reliable to not do the initial rotation. I would just wait for the piece to spawn and then tap the button twice. Do y'all like also do it that way, or how do you
Yeah,
feel with that?
you can do that. The
Because like the holding and then tapping again, like something about that.
you need
Yeah,
to. It's asymmetric. You have to look at the table because it's asymmetric.
yeah.
I will say, instead of like double tapping, a trick I learned literally 2 hours ago, because by default, the game maps to like the three buttons being left, right, and left. So if it happens to be like a left rotation, you can just hold one of the rotate buttons, and then as it spawns in, just tap the second, I guess, rotate left button, which is like a fun
Oh,
trick, but unless you like add extra mappings, like it's not like you'd be able to do that for the right rotation.
interesting. Okay. This is one little thing that doesn't really matter, but the initial rotation, it's also indicated with a little sound effect when it happens. Which, like, when you discover that, it's like, ooh,
Very.
it's so satisfying.
This is a very musical game
Yeah.
in
It is.
general. It has a lot of kind of sounds that kind of have like a natural rhythm they create, and then
Mhm.
also just the gameplay in general because it has this kind of periodicity to it that sort of ebbs and flows as the game goes on. It's a very naturally musical game.
Mizuguchi, back the fuck off.
Oh,
True.
true. He at least made Luminous, so like let's cut him some slack.
True.
I did want to you mentioned the like the column spawning, which is sort of like also like there's like this asymmetry that's present throughout the whole game that makes like the left to right aspect really interesting. For one, because it's like it's 10 columns wide, right, for the play field.
I think so, yeah.
And so that
Sounds
means
right.
that there's no like central column for blocks to drop in, right? And I think you can. Do they not drop in? I feel like I always have to look at column 6. Is column 6 not the drop column?
I
It's
think six being the drop sounds correct.
because and this is like one of my biggest issues, like for where I'm at the game. Is just like constantly fucks me up. Is that because of the way the eye rotation works, is it's much easier to rotate it mid-flight, quote unquote, when you're moving it towards the right side. When you're rotating right into like a right side hole, the right piece, like it's basically the whole way the rotation system works is it's gonna like sort of there is like a particular point on it that it's going to like attempt to rotate and check multiple rotations at, and this is the way like the wall kick system works, because it'll basically try a bunch of different orientations, and some of those can result in weird like skipping through the blocks, right? So you always want to drop like on this right side because it's a much easier to get the eyepiece down in there, especially at 20G, in case you're in a situation where you can't like you have like a discrepancy in your stack. If you use the initial rotation and drop it down vertically, it'll get stuck. So you drop it down flat and then you rotate it, and because it favors the right side, it'll drop down on the right word well. But at the same time, because of the way like the slight asymmetry in the spawn, it'll like you have sort of like less space to move on the right side, right? In general, when pieces are coming down, like there's more spaces to the left and the right. And I just I know personally, I constantly get in situations where I suddenly have a left well open up. I like overfill the right side because there's just there's less room for me to work with over there.
Yeah.
And then,
I mean, yeah. Then the key point with the eye is that when it rotates, it basically hinges on its third block from the left.
Yeah.
So rotating it on the right is much easier. It requires one less like empty room of space horizontally than on the left, and that is very significant. But I mean, you gotta just take it, because sometimes it just you have to.
Oh yeah.
You just have to put stuff on the left, and so it's like.
Well, it's a very like interesting aspect of the game is that it like because I mean it's not a problem in the sense that like it's an issue. It's like
Yeah, I know. I know what you're saying.
it's transformative for the experience in terms of like that constant push and pull in terms of the stacking, where it's like you're often going to find yourself in situations where you have to deal with that, and then that introduces this interesting like aspect of third column play, where you want to make sure your third column dip to the fourth column is strong enough that you can make that rotation if you have to. But then the more you like, okay, I'm in a left well situation, I need to solve it by putting something down there. The more you commit to like making that work and making sure you can get the eyepiece down there in lieu of like other options you have, or just covering the hole and moving on to get the stack flatter, is that it will like sort of perpetually push you towards that well, because your whole stack has been based around.
Yeah, and you can't stall. You can't just stall indefinitely, because if the stat gets too high and the like if the piece can't actually fit in the playfield, I think maybe you have like one row of leeway past the like 20th row or whatever. But if it can't fit, you actually just cannot rotate the piece. So basically what that means is once it gets high enough, the eyepiece just can't rotate, and that is you're in like a major disadvantage, like do or die state then.
Yeah. Seeing how 4 completely, like, I don't know what the actual ceiling is in 4's, I guess, ceiling, but seeing the pieces completely hang off the very top of the screen while you're still playing is
so
fucking
funny.
hilarious.
Well, and 4 also like we're talking about TGM 4, right? They also, one of the big things they changed is that you can actually do the initial rotation where you do a complete like a double rotation initially. And that replaces like so many of these like issues, which of course replaced with other issues, but it's like you can sort of see like that, like that's definitely something that's still unique to like these older games, is that particular like initial rotation dynamic, because it is very limited. I mean, and the thing with the TPs, that's the fucking logo of the game. Like it is literally that one evil fucking piece, like the big T hanging out. And it's probably also just because it's like, Tetris, it's got a T, right? But it's funny, it's like it is so prominent, and then you get to that point in the game, it seems like a cure-all, and then you're like, oh my god, this is like each of these pieces like suddenly it's funny because I feel like the bane of NES Tetris is usually like the Z's and the S's, because they have a proclivity to like I don't know if I know there's something fucking like fucked up with those old like randomizers, but like if you get too many of them in a row, and it can happen in this game occasionally, like you'll act like it'll really fuck up your stack. Because you just don't have like if you flatten it out too much, then putting down Z's and S's is a major pain. And in this one, once you get to 20G, like Z's and S's are usually one of your easier pieces to work with. Because everything else has some like major Achilles heel, and especially with like the L's and J's, you have to be very careful with your initial rotation because they'll get caught if you do the pyramid rotate like stack building, and it's too like I always think of it as like your platform. Like you always want to build your platform out. If your platform's too thin, it's very easy to get the L's and J's caught. If you're not like good with your initial rotation, it's very like the way each of the pieces suddenly interacts in 20G is so incredible.
Yeah, and a lot of the way you end up placing them better is by you place them in a way that keeps your mobility, but then it makes overhangs, and you try to fix the overhangs later.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Z's and S's don't tend to make overhangs. Just because
It's interesting because like I've noticed in my more recent play as I've become like a lot more comfortable with like T-spinning and setting up structures that use T-spinning is that you sort of want that LNJ overhang, especially with like how the randomizer works, right? Where you're sort of like whatever I have and whatever I've gotten recently, I
don't think we ever explained the randomizer.
But, yeah, I figured we could
shortly speaking, it just checks the last 6 pieces you got, and it's less likely you'll get one of those pieces, I believe.
Yeah,
Oh, let me double check that.
Yeah, that whole like dynamic, you end up like if you expect a T to be coming up like soon, you haven't gotten one in a while, and you have like L's and J's, like getting an overhang and purposely setting up a situation where you can like you have a weird overhang like that you can fix with a T spin, and then you can just maneuver the T in there because the T's just gonna fall into one of those holes anyway and get stuck. So you might as well get it stuck in a hole where you can T spin and then clear up all of any incongruities that you have in your particular stack structure, and that like aspect of it is like the and I feel like I have like personally so many of those left that I still have not like internalized, like out of the ones I have like I have some I have internalized, and there's so many like just watching videos I'm like, oh my god, like I should, but it's so hard to consciously think about, right? Because you're moving so fast.
It's 4. Oh, my bad. I said it's the last 4 pieces. The way it works is it checks the last 4 pieces, and it tries to and when it's generating it, it'll roll the random number 1 through 7, and then if the piece that it just rolled is in the last 4 pieces you got, then it'll try again, and it'll do that. It'll try that 6 times, and then if it still can't do it, then we'll give it you another one. Basically, TLDR, it just means that you are less likely to get the pieces that you got, the last 4 pieces that you got. That's all it means. So it's not as strictly predictable as like the guideline 7 bag in the same way, but it's kind of approximately, if you haven't gotten an eye piece in a while, you'll probably get one, but maybe you won't.
This is definitely my favorite sweet spot for that time.
Yeah, and when I was younger, like getting into Tetris, like the idea of 7 bag was really sexy to me because I was like, ooh, it's a very clean and elegant system because you can always predict when pieces are coming up. But now that I'm like an adult and woke now, like I realize that it's like too predictable because you can just very easily generate these structures in a very particular way. And not to say there's like not like a certain skill involved with that, because there is some variance, but you lose a lot of the reactability of kind of still having like an unpredictable system that is still balanced around variability, but not so cut and dry to where you can just make the same structure every single time.
I'll say real quick, this doesn't matter at all, but the T piece logo, I think that's just the general Tetris logo. That's like every Tetris game now.
Yeah, they had what is TGM1? TGM1's logo is different.
Yeah.
Like
I don't know when it started, but like across Tetris games, but like before the comics cook, I just wanted to clarify that.
No, I wasn't saying that they did it because of that particular interaction, but it is just funny that like that sort of like very famous like aspect of the series, right?
Yeah.
And it's like very prominent part is suddenly like such a like evil part of the high level of this game. Even though it's generally such a it's a piece that you want to get, right? And back when I played Guideline, like if I wasn't holding an I often was holding T's because you could just sort of slot them in everywhere. So not having that here is yeah, it's fucked up.
I'll say
Can
the
I run my
TGM. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Can I run my bit about how this is just the like perfection of arcade games and action games in general?
It's not even a bit.
And it's not a bit; it's a fake bit. It's a true bit. That's what I might call it.
Yeah.
Uh,
You go for it.
yeah. So this is something I've been thinking about because my background with this game is that I started playing it in January, so like 7 months ago. I started picking it up around when we were doing Crazy Taxi.
Yeah.
And then I got frustrated with Crazy Taxi, even though it's an excellent game, as we already discussed. And so I was kind of still playing this on and off, and honestly, it has actually like stopped me from playing a lot of other games because I think fundamentally a lot of the things that I do appreciate about sort of arcade style games are just ultimately done the best I've ever seen them here. The thing about a lot of arcade, like, well, first of all, Tetris is you'd consider an action puzzler. That's the category of / genre. But really, in terms of the actual types of decisions you're doing, it is essentially like an action game in the sense that it's around the decisions are basically around positioning and like spacing and
Yeah.
heavy time restrictions, dynamic execution elements, etc. Where it's sort of like it's about adapting to this space and sort of keeping control of it.
Yeah. Well, and this is like this game is such a great like the two main kinds of dynamism I've talked about before in some of my articles is like you have both this random dynamism, you have this like very strong randomizer. There's not that many pieces to randomize. It's relatively good about not giving the same piece like at least more than twice in a row. But then also like the stack permutations are so vast, right? Especially the stack permutations in terms of how they interact with the like the randomizer, right? It's like you're sort of guaranteed like the way you personally interact with the game and how you build the stack is like I'm sure like almost everyone's gonna have certain like patterns to how they play, right, and how they think. And even like high level players are like they're not gonna like all fall in the same bucket. But it's sort of unmatched in that like you get both the the vast state space dynamism where you're like constantly trying to reckon with like new states you found yourself in just because they've never occurred before. You just built the stack slightly differently or what have you. And then also like this random dynamism, like it's gonna throw like new shit at you because it's not like it's not fixed and it's fixed in certain ways in terms of like the gravity values and the lock delay values and your like your DAS values and all that kind of thing. But it's like always going to like with how short the game is and how little game there is, it just never feels the same. Like no matter how many times you play it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I mean that was one of the things I was gonna mention. Firstly the pacing. I would say a lot of the great arcade games are known for extremely fast pacing, relatively speaking, because of the context that we're in. Obviously, you have a cab, right, and it's like you got to keep people going on and off, so people can keep putting money in it. Which is, I mean, it's kind of a cynical origin, but I think that's super fast, high pressure, like show me something cool immediately type thing. Has it's a really interesting and enjoyable game design sensibility. But honestly, as I've played a lot of arcade games, I've found a lot of them are still too long. Beat 'em ups are notorious for this. There are a lot of beat 'em ups that are like 40 minutes, which is ridiculous. People here are gonna think I'm insane, but the beat 'em up heads will probably know what I'm talking about. I'm not a beat 'em up head. I've only played a few, but like a lot of the ones I've tried are like because they have this pacing focus by virtue of being an arcade game. When they fall short, it's sort of put into sharper relief. but TGM is basically like the best paced action game ever made in that way, because the master mode is like 12 minutes probably, and then death mode is even faster than that, and I'll talk about that in a second. So, and it's like there aren't like bad parts to it for the most part. They're like, you're always essentially focusing on these fundamentals, and then the fundamentals are just so ridiculously strong. And like, because a lot of games, combat games especially, which are usually sort of action games, most of them focus on some kind of combat, are just really hard to balance. They use very, very, very many of them have ways to break them, because certain characters or moves or tactics are just too powerful. I mean, Tetris doesn't actually have any of that at all.
Yeah.
I mean, fundamentally, you have to just take into account. You just have to take into account everything. You don't have like. You have strategies in the sense that there are certain certain maneuvers you can get yourself to get good at, and aspects of your game you can focus on. But it's not. It just doesn't have like. It's just so fundamentally solid, and also the scoring system is so intuitive too, that even at where we are a comparatively speaking low level play, that's still something that sort of engages you and you can look at and use a metric of like, oh, how good am I at the game, and then you can feel good when you like beat your personal best and such.
Yeah, the thing about common games is interesting because I think you're totally right, because once you combine sort of random enemy AI with like the ability for the player to just utilize the space however they want, that is, I think, the difficult thing to balance, right? It's difficult to like figure out, okay, AI that is persistent, will follow the player, is not like stallable, cheesable in that way. There's just, you're throwing so many things into question. Whereas in a game like Tetris, when you're creating like your own obstacles just by playing the game, right? I think that's the special sauce.
Like, just also the space is so much more. It's so much more
It's denser.
stringent about the
Yeah.
space. So many combat games are very liberal with the amount of space they give you
Yeah.
and to work with, and Tetris is extremely punishing in comparison.
Yeah.
We used to like in our friend group, our benchmark is the Sega Rally is like, how many Sega Rallies is this game?
Yeah.
And TGM is one of the few games that it hits the. I guess like, well, if we were better at like if you look at actual Grandmaster runs, they're like not more than 7 minutes long. Like and doing it on death is even shorter.
Yeah, Master is about 1.5, and Death is a little less than 1.
Yeah, like it's very.
In terms of
And
Sega
even-
Rallies, that's the unit we're using.
Yeah.
See, when I first came up with this idea, the unit used to be Alien Soldier, but like I realized now that was like baby thinking, and I had to grow up a little bit. So there you go.
Yeah, that is sort of like the insane like because it is so, I think, radical to like, how long is it? Alien Soldiers, like it's less than 40 minutes,
yeah.
like maybe
It's
30.
like 40 minutes.
Yeah,
exactly.
like, and like to a lot of people, like 40 minutes would be like an absurdly short game
Yeah.
nowadays. But I think when you're in this like run style architecture, like you sort of like driving it even lower is like, because if you think about it, like from like the racing game perspective, like those tracks are not like, long, right? And the maintenance, like long-term aspects of it, are not necessarily like interesting outside of like the real life context or like extreme simulation context, because of the like, if you're not simulating wear and tear and all that, there's no reason to like have the endurance element beyond just like, are you consistent, right? So it is really like, can you like in this short period of time with these extremely dense number of actions, like or like extremely dense like action possibility space, right? And extremely granular actions. Can you like execute well enough over the course of like a short span? Which I think is where like a lot of games are moving to. You see a lot of games that are in like we're very much in like a heavily checkpointed era of like extremely difficult games, right? Well, something like tap, it's interesting because you retain like that sort of like there's that wildly dense like possibility space, and then but the actual like inputs are not necessarily like super complicated. Now they are like very frequently at the frame level, right? So it is like they're significant and like can change drastically within small like intervals of frames. But
Yeah,
it all yeah.
I was gonna say I want to. Once you finish, I want to use that as a jumping off point too.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that it like there's so many other games that they either have to elongate it. Like, and I think beat 'em ups are like this. Like if you look at like the modern sort of like well-reasoned beat 'em up movement, I think there's a lot of stuff like this is almost like chess, and it's actually not that complicated to get into from a like input perspective, which is great, but then also like a lot of the classics never really thought about condensing the experience and trying to get it into like to just smash and compress like how many like decisions you're making per second. And Tetris sort of is that game. Tetris is one of those games that is like you constantly have to be thinking about your next move. If you're not thinking a piece ahead, you're fucked. If you're not thinking multiple pieces ahead that you have no idea what they might look like and planning around multiple pieces ahead, you're also fucked. It's like that element of it is like really unparalleled.
Yeah, and that's something I have 2 points. One is this is one thing I was thinking of yesterday, which is actually that the way the way you have to play around like every piece at once, especially under the 20G restrictions, where the consequences can be very significant for not taking into account the possibility of a particular piece appearing at any given time. A lot of games, there's a funny argument you can make. It's not even an argument; it actually is a pretty valid point for a lot of games where if they're too easy, you can be like, oh, turn on the turbo mode by going into cheat engine and turning up the game, the game speed. Or some of the games have built-in turbo modes. Devil May Cry, Fight and Rage, there are other ones. I think one of the Final Fight ports is a turbo mode, which is awesome. But the problem with this is that a lot of the way these sort of input systems are designed, you can't really speed them up past a certain amount, or else the inputs just become not really feasible to be able to do. Within reason. Like if you want to do a basic combo, because your goal, generally speaking, from doing something like that would be to have the player make decisions faster. And the sort of naive increase the speed of the game, the execution requirements become onerous far before the point in which you would want the decisions to get to. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah,
But
no, sure.
TGM is not, or actually has the ability to get to this point for a bunch of reasons. This game's execution stuff uses a lot of buffering.
Yeah.
You can buffer almost every action. You can buffer the rotation, as we've mentioned. You can buffer the piece movement. You can do things where you're holding a direction, and then the piece comes out and immediately starts going that direction, and then you wait, long enough that you are sure then it will have hit the side, and then you hit the rotation button again. And that's something you can plan out, and that it's something where the actual action takes place very quickly, but for how quickly that action takes place, the input is actually not that strict. In TGM1, right, the highest the difficulty gets is the gravity just goes to 20G, right? And you play like that for a while. And then after you demonstrate enough consistency and speed of play, being not hesitating on placing pieces, then okay, you did it, right? TGM2 actually is able to scale beyond that because there is a delay, as mentioned, between there's a little the game kind of pauses for a quarter of a second, a little less, when you do things like clear lines, wait for a new piece to spawn, lock the piece into place, right? And TGM2 actually, as the game goes on, it decreases those time spans even further. So then you have still 20G, but you have even less time to actually conceptualize the moves you're making and what move you need to make and all those types of things. And the pinnacle of this is death mode, this was added in the plus update for TGM2, where it just starts you at 20G at extremely fast numbers of those, where you have very little time to you have very little delay when you clear lines, when you place pieces, when the piece between the piece locking or the piece being on the ground and it locking fully into place. And so that's like it's actually just like it's testing your speed of decision making at such a ridiculous level that is so hard to it's so hard to really get that in almost any other game of this type with this type of decision making. I'm like a death guy now, by the way. I started playing death a lot, and I'm like better at death than I am at master, comparatively speaking, which is kind of a weird situation to be in.
Yeah.
It does
I
sound
was gonna
like
say it sort of feels like they're scavenging through the cupboard. It's like it's a very programmer way to approach difficulty, and I think works really well here because there's just not that many variables at play, right? Where like they're basically like literally any single thing, like even like basically they're just animation timers, right? And so many games would just treat them like animation timers, and they actually like well, this is a variable that we can scale, so we're just gonna
Yeah.
scale it, and they'll touch any aspect of the game they can.
I want to say real quick, Papaka, your approach to death mode, it sounds like crack cocaine. It sounds like okay.
It is kind of like I go back to master mode and I'm like mad that it's like because there's in the speeds like 300 to 500 between those, right? You're not fully in 20G yet.
Yeah.
So I'll like do a move that works in 20G, but because it's not 20G, it like the piece doesn't fall like one slot, one row down when I expected it to, and then I get mad.
Yeah,
This is sort of an interesting other aspect of like this, especially this is something that a lot of arcade games don't get right. Right, it's like that early gameplay, like making it interesting because if you want to hit Grandmaster, you still need to be playing like extremely fast in the early sections where it's not like placing the pieces for you, right? And that ends up requiring like more inputs for one. You actually do need
That's
to sonic the
so weird. It's so
Yeah.
weird that the early stuff because there's Sonic Drop. Did we mention Sonic Drop?
we did.
Think
Yeah,
so.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
we did.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But yeah, the like that aspect of it where it's like that's sort of like that's how I know I had like a good day or a bad day is like one of my many like things because my play is so variable. Is that like there are days where I'm like, oh my god, Master feels too long. Those are days I can't hack it because if I'm like just blitzing through the first parts of Master and I'm not even particularly fast, like I think my 783 or whatever took me 9.5 minutes or something, which is still way lower than like GM like splits. But even then, it's like I should be getting through up to 200 like fast enough that I don't even really think about it. Like it just sort of happens. Like and that quality of it makes it so that like when you get to the brain broken point, you're like actually Master's too long, Death is too short. Like you can still squeeze so much out of Master to make it a worthwhile experience.
Yeah. Again, I was going. What I was going out with the joke is like, okay, death. I just get the higher dosage faster, and
It literally is that.
and like
It's just it's like my shmups are too long thing. Actually, that's not a fully that's not a full take. Do not quote me on this. But I was playing some caravan modes and such. I was like, oh, this is fun. It's like you just kind of play it, and then death mode's kind of like the ultimate expression of that idea, where it's just like the hardest you can basically start the game at while still having a difficulty curve.
yeah. It's also I think it's just a good inclusion in general because I think at my like level and just pace right now, it will take me a while to reach kind of the higher echelons of master difficulty. So the fact I can see that at least right now and like I get a feel for it and then it is useful practice in itself in the death mode.
Yeah, I think having it there, I don't think it's perfect because I think it's a little too hard to start out learning 20G on than would be ideal. But that's also another thing. A lot of arcade games have major difficulties about. You can sort of bypass it in modern emulator save states stuff,
Yeah.
but like a lot of in the original context, you would be like, how do you learn this? Like, there's kind of I mean, you can maybe watch someone else do it, but even then, it's not always the same.
That's the Kamiya method.
Having death mode, it like actually gives you a way to engage with that part of the game in a much shorter time scale immediately.
Yeah, because I'm not good at TGM yet. I've been capping out at like 475 when I'm warmed up, so I'm like right on the cusp of like 20G, but in death mode I can get to like 125, so still like kind of play within that threshold. But it's that like I don't know what you want to call it, but yeah, just being able to get to that part at least by like smashing your head against it. Like it is cool that it is there as an option, even if the on ramp is still like nuts.
Phenomenal game. Fantastic game.
Yeah,
Perfection.
yeah.
Is there
Game
much
broke my
more to say?
brain.
I don't know. I think it's TGM, dude.
This is probably like because I also grind 2DX, and I'm at the point now where it's like very on and off for me. And you know, both of them have extremely high skill ceilings, but it's like 2DX is when I have to like bend over backwards to like get across I guess you'd call it like the game design like value of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it is like extremely execution heavy. Don't have to do that for this game. This is like this is the benchmark for like, you know, the I had talked about this recently on stream and gotten some like pushback that I think in terms of like people got sort of confused. It's like because to me this is the 11 out of 10 game, and it's not even like, you know, other games are bad or whatever. It's like I'm assuming any like 10 out of 10, any like super favorite of mine, there is some level of like I'm having to gas it up a little bit, you know, like the guy like trying to gas up his bike in the garage is like, bro, he trying to gas it up, right? There's some aspect of it I sort of have to like hand wave or bypass, or there's like some
Crazy
distortion
Taxi
in my
is a perfect example.
yeah, there's like so many like weird parts of that game and many other, you know, games I love and especially ones that people would like not expect. This is like the actual like, you know, you can't fucking go wrong with this
Yeah.
game. It's like there's just so much like incredible. Every line of code is a masterpiece, you know.
The only okay, this is the only I mentioned this to Pang the other day. The only thing that's like if I were writing the magazine review, right? The early 2000s magazine review, the minus bullet point, 8 out of 10, right? The badge system is kind of doesn't do anything. It's just kind of funny.
Yeah, they need to build
Oh,
on
actually,
it more. It doesn't need
yeah,
to
exactly.
fit.
Yeah,
It
it's
should
very
be active
underdeveloped.
perks.
Because the badge system, it just when you do things like random things in the game, it just puts a little like thing on the side of the screen. It's like you did it. It doesn't actually do anything. So, and you're not really supposed to get them all.
Yeah,
maybe the badge with every subsequent badge and the 100 like level range, it should add like one more piece preview. That and it would be a perfect game.
Yeah,
you actually have to earn it. That'd be sort of sick.
to purposely get the recovery one where you let it go to the top of the top 2 rows and then clear it.
Yeah.
Pang, what you were saying earlier, the interesting point for me there, and I think I said this on stream as well, is that, okay, other games, they may be grasping for something like different, and in the process, like you have that different thing, but then you introduce just all this like other shit, right? And I guess with TGM, it's just, okay, they just selected the perfect set of ingredients, you know? They selected like, and this is like the corny thing to say with Tetris in general, right? Like, oh, if you change one thing, it's no longer perfect. It is the perfect video game. But I think with TGM 2, it's especially true. And again, I think doing this in Crazy Taxi kind of back to back is interesting because there's shit in Crazy Taxi obviously that Tetris is like not giving me at all. But then if I'm approaching it with this like totally like analytical academic mind, it's like, okay, there really is no more perfect game other than TGM 2. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also sort of a illustration of like this is one of the big reasons for iteration in games, which I think it's like sometimes lost when you look at too artistic of a lens, right? And even like art, like it iterates and it builds, but it's like there's sort of like concepts of even like irony and pastiche and that kind of things to it. But the big games have always like in the old sense, like in the traditional sense of games, have always like had rule sets that constantly expanded and house rules that sort of grew into like national things or like, you know, like common across like, you know, international leagues and that kind of thing. And for something like Tetris is like the way it's like grown and expanded has all these different dialects, right? Is for one, I think it's very important to like Tetris as a concept, right? Because Tetris is more than just like a singular game. It is like this
Yeah.
overarching set of rules, and I think TGM2 is especially what we were saying earlier with like the individual variables being scalable and all this is like I think they understood maybe more than like virtually anyone else is like these rules are all meant to be malleable and expandable and like you can play with them in so many different ways to like curate the experience and have this experience evolve, right? And that's something I think is extremely rare when it comes to these kinds of games. You so rarely get to see these like iterative works that like build upon the old ones in a very like real way, but then also like understand like the power of iteration and the power of like building upon and sort of see beyond like, oh, these rules are not something that are fixed in place. I can play with them. I can change the way this and this and this and this things work. It's a very like it's an inspiring game in that way, right? It's sort of a it's crazy how like old it is and still like we very rarely see games like this nowadays that build in such a you know uh like awe-inspiring way, I think.
Yeah, that was like the exact like what I pretty much was wanting to say, and you worded it probably better than I could. Just like I think part of it is because of how flat its systems are. Like I think fighting games are kind of a funny example of this. Like
Yeah.
maybe Tekken is probably a good analog where they don't change the mechanics too much throughout the games, but even then there's very I don't know, yeah, like I'm just trying to think of other analogs where they have like a baseline set of systems and it's just so, you know, expressive throughout each version. But oh, I know what I was gonna say. Like even fighting games, I think they still end up being different in different ways. Like I can maybe make preferences of like, oh, well, I like the balance of, Tekken 5 more than 7 or whatever, like some random thing. But Tetris, the baseline mechanics are so like readable and it's very, very granular ways that the systems are different and that they're able to still be, differentiated in that way. And that's before like the aesthetic leanings of it, like because it's such a flat like designed game, not in a bad way, but just it's very readable. They kind of take an excuse to change the vibe, I guess, if you want to call it that, in different ways, which is really cool.
Yeah, we've been going for a while, but I just wanna reiterate a point Peng already said, which is just to emphasize how crazy it is that this game is not flawed, considering how many of the greatest gameplay-driven games ever have massive, deep, critical mechanical flaws.
Yeah.
It's insanely common across effectively the entire medium. I want to say it's a problem almost unique to video games, but that might be outside of the scope of this video. Okay, it's another thing that people are gonna get mad at me. It makes me want to become an artsy game person because all the people who like combat games didn't tell me to play this instead of whatever game they like.
So
Yeah.
fucking true.
But okay, don't kill me. It was kind of a joke.
Maybe a funny final word would be, can y'all think of a game that's as perfect as this one?
I think the ones I like are good and the ones that other people like are bad.
So true.
Thanks. Some multiplayer games, there's like I think a higher sort of like especially some of the like fighting games that have had like super long communities, like you look at Third Strike or Super Turbo or Melee or some of the Tekkens or whatever, like the games that have been able to evolve in that way, and there's like sort of a because there's not like the same sort of like metagame around Tetris, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is sort of like illustrative on its own, like
You have to create a metagame around it.
yeah, and there's so like there's so many advantages to doing that for like a game health and game evolution perspective. And Tetris did and like TGM2 is like the like in terms of single player games, because I think this is sort of the like this is also something I talked about before is like a lot of the game design stuff and like the people we run with and like the concepts we engage with, it is a lot of flailing to justify single player games. And in terms of that sphere, TGM2 is like the one, right?
Yeah.
It's like next fucking level.
Yep, it's pretty good.
It's
Fuck
epic.
yeah. Fuck yeah. Okay. I think that's all we have on that.
I don't know if this will make it, but what's y'all's favorite TGM2 background? That's the actual burning question
Oh
that
god.
I'm wondering.
I think I don't think I've ever paid like conscious attention to them. I think I'm too ADHD brain.
I like 500 because
Yeah,
that transition from 400 to 500 is like so stark.
see, you get it.
I sort of like the 600, but like looking at the 600 is sort of like weird because it is just sort of like a big pool, right? But it is like sort of calming in that moment.
I always figured it's like some like kind of those pools with the nuclear reactors and stuff like that they submerge them in. It looked like some sort of coolant.
Yeah. There's one that's like, I think it must only show up in the intro sequence. It's like 2 rotating gears with like, it's like the
You mean the 200?
No. Not like that's like a giant like bunch of planetary gears or whatever. But there's one that it's like it's almost like an input shaft and output shaft for a car. But it's not. It's just like some weird random thing, and it's like 2 of those. Like,
I know.
Yes.
Yes.
Each other, and they lock in, and then they just pull out, and they just do it over and over again.
I think it's for. Yeah, I think it might be for multiplayer or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The 500 one where it's also like the bunch of like not pistons or whatever. But like that kind of like reminds of like horses or something.
Yeah.
Like churning in the background. Because that's like the oh shit, time to get real moment.
It's something I never noticed about 900 is like I mean, it's not even parallaxing, but just like the movement of the clouds, like kind of at the bottom of the background.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So sick.
Great game.